Okay, I am still here in Hollywood, California, the great state of California. I know, I say this just to annoy you guys because every time I say how much I love California, you tell me that it's California. It's both. It's both wonderful, and that's what makes it so sad that liberals are ruining it right now. But it reminded me, sitting here in California, reminded me of a little story that I want to tell you before we get into the meat of the show. So my husband and I moved away from California. We left California right after the 2020 election. In fact, I left the day after the election. I voted, and then the next day I hopped on a plane and left. We moved back to the East Coast, and I flew because I was 7 months pregnant, and my husband drove the car across the country. But I stopped in Ohio, which is where my parents live, on the way back to visit them for a couple weeks, and to give my husband a chance to road trip across the country with all of our stuff. And in Ohio, I remember having a discussion. We'll call it a discussion. It verged on an argument, actually. A discussion with my dad about the election itself and about whether it had been on the up and up, whether it was fishy, whether it was fair, whether it was stolen. And this is literally the week after the election happened. We didn't have a lot of data. We didn't have a lot of information, but we all had this feeling. We all had this instinctual kind of, something happened that wasn't quite right. And the argument that I had with my dad was that he was already on board with, nope, this wasn't fair. We need an investigation. We should not certify this election. Essentially, was this stolen? I think so. That was his position. And I was a little bit more nuanced about it. In fact, if you want to know my exact opinion on it, I think I still have a YouTube video up. I did a YouTube live just a week or two after the election in which I explained my feelings at the time, what it was at that moment, just a week or two afterward. But essentially, I'll summarize it right now. I said, I too have that instinct, right? All these shady things happened. All these fishy things happened, whether it was the electioneering that we saw, where states were changing laws, but without the consent of the legislature, whether it was drop boxes or mail-in ballots, whether it was signature degradation, all of this really shady stuff was happening. And then we saw ballots being counted and then the counting stopped overnight and then restarted, and there were supposed to be videos and there were supposed to be poll watchers, but there weren't. And then big boxes of ballots were found, all this shady stuff, right? I felt all of that too. And I thought, of course we need an investigation. However, I thought that we shouldn't be calling for the overturning of an election until we had evidence, until we have proof. And the reason for that is for the same reason that I reject the believe all women trope, because that denies due process of law. It denies due process of law to the person who is being accused, whether it's Kavanaugh, who was accused by Christine Blasey Ford, and the left told us, well, we have to believe her. We believe women, and this accusation in and of itself is enough. We don't need to prove it. We don't need evidence. We don't need to actually take this to a court of law. We just have to believe her. And that would have been a violation of Kavanaugh's due process if an allegation could just take him down. And I think the same thing, or I thought at the time, the same thing applied to the election. Of course, there was a lot of questions. There was a lot of shady, a lot of fishy, a lot of instincts that told us that, something was really, really wrong here. This stunk to high heaven. But I didn't think that was enough. I didn't think that was enough to actually overturn the election. I thought it warranted an investigation, and that's all. And so my dad and I got into a debate about this because he kept using the phrase totality of evidence. When you have this totality of evidence, all of these different shady things, that becomes not a coincidence. And I said, sure, that's fine. It's not a coincidence. We do have a totality, but we have to be able to put a thumbtack in it. We have to be able to say, here is the proof on the table. And that was around the time that President Trump and his team were promising to release the Kraken. That was his phrase. Giuliani and Sidney Powell and his legal team was promising to show us all this evidence that he claimed showed that Joe Biden had stolen the election and that President Trump was the real legitimate winner here. Trump ultimately did not show proof. He ultimately did not release this Kraken. He released Giuliani instead. Giuliani probably ruined any chance the Republicans had at the time of proving their case because he got sidetracked by conspiracy theories or valid issues like there being voters on the voter roll who were dead voters. And he insinuated that everyone who was on a voter roll who shouldn't have been on a voter roll had actually been exploited, that there had been fraudulent votes based on every single dead voter on the voter roll, which there was no proof of this. It's a vulnerability, but there was no proof. So all of this being said, fast forward now a year and a half, you and I have talked a lot about the actual concrete put a tack in it evidence that has come to light since the week after the election. We've talked about the electioneering that violated state law. We've talked about what happened in Wisconsin. You know, the Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Gableman actually proved that what people in Wisconsin did, what the Democrats in Wisconsin did, violated state law, how they changed election law to accept more ballots that would have been, they're not fraudulent, meaning it wasn't someone who was claiming to be someone else casting a ballot in someone else's name, but it was invalid ballots, people who were submitting ballots too late, or with a signature that didn't match, or too early, or in a drop box that wasn't monitored in ways that would have rendered that ballot invalid. And so you and I have followed along with this and talked about it for a year and a half now. And it turns out, by the way, just to put a pin or to put a bow tie on my anecdote about my dad, I think my dad and I were both right. I think we were both correct, because that fishy feeling, that instinct that we all had that something was really, really wrong. Something was deeply wrong with the 2020 election. That instinct was correct. And I was also correct when I said we need to be able to put a pin on it. So all of this being said, I watched 2000 Mules last night, and that is what I want to talk to you about today. I'm Liz Wheeler. Welcome to The Liz Wheeler Show. Okay, guys, I need to talk to you about YouTube for a minute. So YouTube has, in their terms of service, they have a provision that says that I, as a creator, am prohibited from saying anything about voter fraud that would imply that voter fraud impacted the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. So we're talking about, in this episode, we're talking about 2000 Mules, Dinesh's documentary about voter fraud. So infer what you will about what I say and how it might contradict YouTube's terms of service. So I want to let you know that you can find this entire episode. It's an incredibly important episode. In fact, when I sat down to film this episode, I was originally planning on trying to create what I say in a way that would adhere to YouTube's terms of service, but also convey what I wanted to convey about this documentary, because I want this to reach as many people as possible. So I was trying to come up with a way to say what I wanted to say that would not get me booted off of YouTube. And about 1 minute into the episode, I realized that if I want to say what needs to be said, if I want to analyze this documentary and the election, the presidential election as it pertains to the past election, the 2020 election, but also how it pertains to this fall, the midterms, and the 2024 presidential election, then I can't self-censor. I can't be political, if you will, forgive the pun, with my words. I need to give a straightforward analysis with blunt words in a very measured, very logical, very important way. This conversation needs to be had. And because of that, we can't post this on YouTube, or else I will get booted off of this channel. So you can see this link on the screen. We've posted this for free over on Rumble, so that you can watch and you can listen. I want to hear what you thought of this documentary. I want to hear what you think of my takes, which again, I don't want to have to be political here. You'll hear them for yourself on Rumble. I also want to ask you to subscribe on my Rumble channel for this exact reason. We're working hard to build a community over on Rumble, because these authentic conversations about important, touchy topics that clearly anger the left, they're so insecure about their position, they have to silence me, they have to censor us, this conversation. They can't bear to hear discussion and debate and the truth. But this needs to be had. This is an important and a critically important part of our constitutional republic. So we're trying to build up our community over on Rumble so that we don't have to think about self-censorship, so that you and I have this relationship, this communication, this dialogue about the important topics. So not only are we posting this on Rumble so that you can see it, since we can't post it on YouTube, I'm asking you, please subscribe to my channel on Rumble so that we always have a place that we can have these conversations. With that, the link is up on the screen. You can also find it in the YouTube description of this video. Head on over to Rumble. The episode is out right now. You can listen to it right now. I also have an upcoming interview with Dinesh where I ask him all of the questions that I had after watching his documentary, all the questions that you had after watching his documentary. So I'll see you over on Rumble. If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button below, and ring the bell to make sure you never miss a video.